Welcome, everyone. We are so glad you can join us this evening. I hope you're all staying well, safe, and sane during these strange times. My name's Marianne Mead, and I'm the Assistant Director for Public Services here at the Southwest Harbor Public Library. Like everyone, the library, closed its doors back in March, and we've gradually been finding new ways of safely connecting with our community, such as curbside pickup and welcoming folks into the library by appointment. And I also learned how to Zoom. I've been Zooming all over the place. With this new technology, we can reach out to our friends who can't be here this year, so it's a pretty good thing. Again, I hope you're all doing well. And I want to take this minute, to just thank the countless community members here and away for supporting the library. Thank you so much. Now, in case you didn't know, 2020 is the library's 125th anniversary. Whoa. And the room in which I'm sitting is the original library. So we're 125 years old this year. Now, for all the obvious reasons, we're forwarding many of our planned celebratory events into a safer future. But in the meantime, we have some special items for sale to celebrate this special occasion. We have these beautiful soup mugs with the library logo. We have sets of 8 cards that the folks at Saturn Press put together for us. And Bob Thayer made a calendar of Acadia National Park with beautiful photographs also. So if you need any special things for your holiday shopping, give us a call, because we've got what you need. So before I start our event, sorry about that little sideline, but I couldn't miss this opportunity with a captive audience.
Yeah.
I want to just go over a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, we are going to record this event. And secondly, if you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them to the Q&A feature, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Pretty easy to do. So now it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce Philip Frey and Carl Little. Philip is considered to be one of Maine's finest landscape painters. A brilliant colorist, Philip's primary focus, as you'll see, is color and light. He paints Maine's harbors and islands with a bold palette that captures the light and moods of his home state. His work has been highlighted in several books, including Art of Acadia and Paintings of Portland, both by brothers Carl Little and David Little. Also, his work is held in private and corporate collections, both nationally and internationally, including those of writer Harlan Coben, Dick Wolf Films, Representative Shelley Pingree, Donald Sussman, and the University of Maine Museum of Art. Joining Philip this evening is Carl Little, a library friend, and widely recognized critic of New England art. In addition to the 2 books already mentioned, Carl is author of many art books, including Edward Hopper's New England, The Watercolors of John Singer Sargent, Eric Hopkins' Above and Beyond, just to mention a few. He also wrote the introduction to Philip Frey, Here and Now, published in 2018, that presents the first in-depth look of Philip's work. Please join me in welcoming Philip Frey, and Carl Little. Sorry.
That's okay.
Here we go, into the fry.
Yes, indeed.
Into the fray. So, welcome everyone to a conversation with Philip Frey. And thank you to the Southwest Harbor Library for hosting this virtual and, who knows, virtuous event. Special thanks to Assistant Director Marianne Mead and Library Assistant Melissa Haas for helping to finesse this gathering. I'm glad the library was able to reopen in July following the proper protocols. We need libraries more than ever. I'm excited this evening to have the opportunity to get Phil's perspective on the work that was featured in his recent show at the Courthouse Gallery in Ellsworth. We're going to look at 17 slides and talk about process and place and paint. I will be monitoring the Q&A for any questions folks might have as we move along. So, Phil, before we get into the art, I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about your life in art up to now, for
Sure.
those who may not know how you got where you are to be one of Maine's preeminent landscape painters.
Oh, thank you, Carl. I appreciate it. Yeah,
Sure.
I'd be happy to. Before I get into that, I just wanted to say a quick thanks to the Southwest Harbor Library for inviting Carl and I to have this conversation. Really looking forward to it. Thank you, Marianne and Melissa. And Carl, you and I go way back. You reviewed a show way back in 1990, I think, or something like that, with Carl Antine and I. So I'm looking forward to our continued conversation over the years. A little bit of my history. I went to Ellsworth High School with the eminent and renowned high school art teacher Ken Mike, and then went off to Columbus College of Art and Design, and then Syracuse University, and traveled quite a bit after that to Europe and across country and over to India and Nepal, and then came back and settled here in Sullivan, and lived here and painted for about 17 years without running water, and then eventually got all the amenities, modern amenities. I had electricity that whole time, so don't think it was that rough. And I've been showing in various galleries up and down the coast of Maine and outside of Maine, and I've been with Courthouse Gallery for going on, I think this might be the 14th year. I think so. I think that might be it. 14th. So just a very brief bio sketch there.
Yeah, thank you, Phil.
Sure.
And this photo shows you in your Sullivan studio, is that?
Yes, yep, that's me in my studio. I renovated it almost 2 years ago, and created a larger space with more light, and that's sort of me feeling proud to be in that space.
Well, my memory of a visit, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, was that it was quite a small space.
Yeah, it was a small space. I just sort of opened it up and went up higher within the building itself, and it just made all the difference. And repainted things, painted the ceiling white and the floor gray, and it made a huge difference. So,
and you're in a real artistic neighborhood there too, with Luniform, right? Luniform's just down the road.
Yep, Luniform and Philip Barter, and there's just a ton of artists out here. So
great place to be.
Yeah. So shall I bring up the first slide here?
Yeah, I did want to mention, ask you about in your notes for the slideshow, you mentioned a number of artists who've influenced and inspired you over the years.
Yep.
Matisse, Bonnard, Howard Hodgkin, Picasso, Tom Thompson, one of the Canadian Seven, and Fairfield Porter.
Yep.
And you could see bits and elements of those artists in your work. You also mentioned 2 artists that I'm not familiar with. Alex Konevsky and Zoe Frank.
Yeah.
Tell me, who are they?
Sure. Well, they're contemporary painters, and Alex Konevsky came across my radar when I was working on getting the museum show together with George Kinghorn, and in one of the studio visits, he is just he's such an amazing guy, and he's so generous with his feedback and so forth. And Alex Konevsky was one of the artists that he had suggested that I take a look at, and then in my search I found Zoe Frank as well, and they're both, I guess you would call them, sort of within the disrupted realism field of painting these days, where artists are taking realism and they're disrupting it in a certain way, so it has a sense of time or movement or fracturing or something that. And I think Alex Konevsky is one of the top ones these days. And if you look up, if you get a chance to look up their work, you'll sort of see what I mean.
I will definitely do that. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
I might mention that George Kinghorn might be on the call tonight, except that he's got his own Zoom call.
Oh, he does.
He's doing an interview with Harold Guard, the painter Harold Guard.
Excellent.
Who is now 97 years old, I think.
Wow. Fantastic.
So, anyway,
Fantastic.
George is a wonderful pillar of the art scene in Maine, and the shows he puts on at the University of Maine Museum of Art, and they've just expanded their space there. It's now called the Zillman Museum of Art, I believe.
Right.
Is that right?
It is. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So let's turn to the paintings. And as I mentioned before, I'll be monitoring the Q&A room for any questions you might have along the way. We'll try to keep a brisk pace, knowing how quickly these events go by.
Yeah.
So balance, your first painting here. In your landscapes, it seems to me you often walk the line between representation and abstraction. And so in this painting, while we recognize certain landscape forms, overall, the impression is of an abstract design. And so I'm just curious as to how you make the decision to go one way or the other when you're in front of it.
Yeah. Well, these, every so often I go through a series of what I take some failed paintings, or at least what I think are failed paintings, and then I rework them. And this was part of that group of paintings that were painted more in a representational style. It still has the bare bones, the bare structure of the painting. And so I started reversing it. So I started taking away detail in the painting and simplifying things, which was something I've done before. Some of the pieces that were in the museum show in 2016, I had done the same process. And so I keep kind of pulling back and simplifying, and whenever it feels like it clicks, when it feels it's right, I leave it. And you might be able to see in the background, there's a larger version of this painting, just off. I think you can kind of see it way back there. So it's a larger version, but anyway, that's the process that I kind of go through.
And I was also curious about the title, Balance.
Yeah, balance. I think part of it was sort of it was that process of like how I wanted a balance between the representation and the abstraction. It's like, how far can I go and it still reads as a landscape? And I've been playing with that for many years, as you know, is that pushing and pulling with representation and abstraction. And sometimes I feel like I really want to push it way towards abstraction and see what happens. And it was that, the reason I called it that was, called it balance, was for that particular process and reason.
Yeah, the idea of push-pull reminds me of Hans Hofmann. That was his big, and in a way, that's what you're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Back, forward. And I just want to point out that in a later painting in the slideshow, you'll see that kind of curtain shape coming in from the left. That sort of in the later painting represents rain coming on.
Yeah.
Really love that. Well, let's go on to the next one, Luminous Harbor.
Yes.
So was I right in thinking that this was the Custom House Wharf in Portland?
It is. Yep, you were spot on. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Because I know it's a favorite subject of many painters. One of whom is Tina Ingraham, who's actually showing right now at the Green Hut Galleries. But it seems to me like it's sort of a remnant of the waterfront. It's sort of one of the last places you can go in Portland now to find lobster boats and fishermen and those wonderful kind of vintage houses or structure, not houses, but sheds and Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you discover that place? Or
I had been there many, many years ago, and often over the years, and started. I've done several paintings of that location, and it's, as you noted in your notes, that it's, when I look at that place, it feels like a patchwork. Those sheds. It feels like almost you're going back in time, or you're looking at an archaeological dig in a certain ways,
yeah, yeah,
because you have all these structures that are often to the left side of the painting there, where the white boat is. That something falls apart in the building, and they take some T111, or they some kind of plywood, and they just screw it on there, and that's the fix. Or it's blue polytarp or whatever it is. And then the same thing with the wharf. It's a board gets rots out, and they replace it. And so it was that sense that I wanted to get a little bit of that kind of patchwork feel. And and here, what I did, I did a lot of sort of dripping and allowing the paint just to do what it wanted to do, and a lot of kind of scraping and pushing and pulling again to get that kind of feel.
yeah. One of the things that I love about this painting is that the most distant building almost feels like it's dissolving.
Mm.
Like maybe, to go along with this idea of this place kind of disappearing.
Yeah.
It's almost literally, and that leads me to the observation that the light in this painting is incredible. You go from that very rich dark, the shadows, the blue shadows, to that light kind of yellow.
Yeah, yeah. It's from one of the things I've been doing in terms of taking, like, when I take reference photos for some of these pieces, is I learned from Michael Weymouth's book on using photography as painting, or using photography with painting. And that when you take several photographs, that one that you take for the lighter areas and one for the darker areas, and you put those two together in terms of your reference, rather than having kind of a blown out photograph or really dark area. And the feel here was later in the day when the shadows started coming across, and it's one of my favorite times of day. So
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Thanks.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one. Liquids and solids. Now you in your notes you call this a watershed breakthrough piece. How is it that for you?
Well, for me, I started. Yeah, how to describe that? I think part of it was the working with these, pulling back from having a really high key palette, which I'm generally do, and working with a lot of neutrals, kind of mid-tones and neutral colors, but also getting really, really thick with the painting, and a lot of scraping and adding paint. And then I've been using some squeegees in some of my painting lately, where I'll take whole sections that I've painted, and then the squeegees are anywhere from 4 inches to 6 inches, something like that. And I can take an entire section, like the top left part of that painting is where I've done some of that squeegee, and above the island, and then the island itself, and then the actual rocks, where I can create this, I can smush, for lack of a better term,
the smush process.
The smush process, it's highly technical.
Yeah.
So, making this, just smearing or smushing the paint, moving from one to the next, and stuff that you can't really get with a brush necessarily. And it's yielded some really fun and intriguing results. And again, then I didn't want to push it too far with that, so it became too kitschy with the squeegee. But then reasserting the brush mark in terms of you know, the actual, you can see the brush marks in this in various spots.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Thanks.
You have a really, you know, a very determined and very, yeah, terrific work.
Thank you.
And I was wondering whether this might be Bar Harbor.
No,
because it just looked like one of the porcupines, possibly. But
it does. It's actually out at Schoodic, which is one of my absolute favorite places to paint. There's this big beach at low tide. You know, there's massive rocks, boulders, all the way down to little tiny round and oblong rocks. And my girlfriend and I were at this place on a particularly hot summer day. And then I wandered around taking photographs and sketching. And these were some of the scenes that I saw.
Yeah, Schoodic is a landscape painter's paradise. I think.
My gosh, it's endless. It's really endless. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Let's go on to emerging pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this one, you break up the scene into multiple planes of color, and I felt like it was almost cubist.
Yeah.
The way you've done that, you like to simplify the elements in the scene rather than, for the most part, dwell on details. I mean, there are some paintings, and we'll see one or two, where there is more detail in it. But you're very deft at, you know, getting to the essence, shall we say?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Again, you know, this is that same scene from a couple of slides ago, but slightly different take.
Ah, okay.
And it's sort of off to the left behind the previous boat, you know, so this, you know, that was that one. And so imagine going to the left a little bit and you see that. And so part of the simplification, you know, one, I zoomed in a little bit and made the boat larger and interrupted the portion of the picture plane with, you know, the posts, the piers that were coming up through. And the simplification process or the abstraction is, for me, it's a lot of fun, just sort of figuring out how I can break things down and simplify them, yet have this, you know, sort of the gesture or the essence of a place rather than all the particular details. And a quick little funny story from back in college, one of my professors, Ernie Viveros, and we were in a figure drawing class, and I happened to have the view from the back side of the model, and I was drawing the back, which is a very, very subtle thing to draw. And he came across and he gave me the nickname Subtle Nuance. So it stuck with me throughout my college days. And but the reason I mention that is sort of like to me, it was like trying to get the essence of something. And that's part of what I'm trying to do in the painting process.
Yeah. I have to say, I love your focus on the working waterfront of Maine too.
Thanks.
I mean, I think in doing that, you're preserving in some ways, you know, a kind of a threatened part of the landscape.
Yeah.
I mean, we're fortunately for organizations like the Island Institute and Maine Coast Heritage Trust and other folks who are fighting to maintain these working places, but your paintings remind us of how wonderful those places are.
Yeah, they are. They're quite fantastic.
Let's go on to this is On Balance. This one.
Yeah.
Further simplification and abstraction, and like the earlier one, this one is highly abstracted, a kind of cloudscape made by I want to, you know, say sort of like a color field painter. You know, with your broad areas of color. I love the almost the stacking effect of the clouds.
Yeah.
And you've really reduced the scene to sort of almost like color coding. The yellow, what would the yellow be? The land?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that it was interesting as I painted this piece. It was towards the end of the day, and I had been painting another piece, and I was working on clouds and sky, and I painted this rather quickly in terms of again wanting to try to get the essence of the clouds and the sky. And for me, that color coding, maybe that was the land um, and reflection, that yellow bit in the middle that gets interrupted by the blue.
Yep.
And sometimes it was sort of, because I hang out by the water a fair amount in terms of painting or hiking or what have you, and sort of times, just looking at the phenomena that happens out on water, sometimes you just get these colors or reflections or that are just, wow, okay, how would I get that in paint?
Yeah. I have to say that with the pandemic and the shutdown, living on MDI, over the last 6 months, I've never noticed as sharply as I have the changing of the season and the skies and
Yeah.
if that's another part of the silver lining, I guess,
Yes.
is that just going out into your yard and
Yep.
looking at trees and being able to see the changing views and what's going on out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Have more time to slow down and see what's happening.
How have you been impacted by the pandemic or
Well, in the beginning, I did exactly what you did. I spent more time, outdoors and in my garden, and we'll see a few pieces later on that are evidence of that. And shows sort of kept going because
Yep.
we do them distance, but the teaching part kind of got disrupted for a bit. So I switched to teaching online, doing some Zoom courses. And so in the beginning some of that stuff got canceled. So I had to
Yep.
retool and kind of figure out some of the technical aspects of what we're doing right now.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. It's a different world.
it is.
Let's go on to the next one. Coastal Connections. And I mentioned this in actually a painting that we have of yours has a similar foreground that you almost create kind of a patchwork quilt effect
Yeah.
in some of your paintings.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, go ahead, Carl.
No, but how do you how do you create that foreground?
Yeah, it's kind of a discovery process for me. And when you're out there looking at the rocks, this is out at Grindstone Neck, looking at the end of Grindstone Avenue, out on the water there, on the ledges, and it's looking towards MDI. And when I look at that, it's like in one sense, it's kind of this overwhelming in terms of like painting, and I can really identify with my students. It's like, well, how do you narrow this stuff down and figure out what you want to do? And so for me, because of some of the abstraction stuff that I've been doing, it's been feeding back into these pieces that are a bit more more representational. And so I'm kind of picking out areas of light and dark and color and accentuating one and pushing and pulling others, and creating a pattern that is pleasing to me, but also describes what those ledges and those rocks and that water feels like, as well as sort of the movement part. For me, it's not only about light and color, but it's also about some of the movement of being outside, and the movement of nature and passage of time.
It's amazing how you can use abstraction so wonderfully to in presenting a scene like this. It really is transformative. And something that Marianne mentioned in her introduction, you as colorists, obviously is going on here very strongly. That also is very evident here. I was thinking actually of, there's a wonderful painting in the Farnsworth collection by George Bellows called Romance of Autumn. And he's taken the autumn colors and he's just moved them right up the, just cranked them up.
Yeah.
And it looks like you're, you might be in the Caribbean or something. And he was experimenting with color at that time. And, it is Maine, but it's sort of like a tropical Maine.
I don't know that particular one. What's the name of it again, Carl?
Romance of Autumn.
Romance of Autumn.
One of my favorite paintings.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, check it out. So let's go on to the next one. Surf and Stone. So here I had a specific question. How do you create the illusion of distance in a painting, in this particular painting? So how do you lead the eye from the foreground to a distant prospect?
This is exactly what I was sort of trying to teach my students this past weekend, is that very thing, among others. So in terms of creating distance, one is the bolder, bigger brushstrokes up front and the bigger shapes up front, but also that diagonal. And I think, can you see the cursor going across the screen?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Cool.
Yep.
So that line there obviously is bringing the eye in a direction towards the back. But then, the stuff back here is changing the greens to a bluer and duller, and also here adding white or gray to it, and especially here that distance back there. But it happens in terms of having sort of sharper, bolder stuff happening up front, and then softer brushstrokes and what they call lost and found edges, or hard and soft edges, like lost edges being kind of like those trees in the background, sky itself.
Oh, I love that. Lost edges. I don't remember that. And are those breakers?
Yeah. This is out at Schoodic, and that's looking over at Moose Island, the one that people go over to at low tide, which I have yet to do. So I've got to actually do that. I hear it's amazing over there. But that's one of those spots. You probably recall the Laughing Wave at Schoodic that I did a bunch of years ago.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, and this is the same spot, and it was inspired by Marsden Hartley's Crashing Wave at Schoodic, which I think was more or less in the same spot, because you can get some really bold,
big,
dramatic.
Right up over the rocks, yeah.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So let's go to something quite different.
Yeah.
Yeah, Watch Where You Step.
Yes.
And I think that's a reference to that ball at the bottom of the stairs.
It definitely is.
Man, I could just see myself. Unfortunately,
coming down at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever.
Yeah. Oops. I left the vacuum cleaner at the bottom of the stairs.
Right.
So you don't paint a whole lot of interiors, but you have over the years. And I find when you do that, it's a real treat. This one is particularly kind of vertiginous.
Yeah.
Kind of that downward perspective, where danger awaits you.
Right.
Is this where is this scene? I'm just curious.
Probably about 4 years ago, I taught a plein air painting workshop out in Southwest Harbor, and some of my students and I rented a house. And this was the house that we were staying in, and it's the quintessential summer Maine cottage with uninsulated walls, and so you could see, and furniture that had been there for generations. Like the couch still had it had a sag in it from generations of people laying there reading books. Summer.
Love those sags. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I've gotten a lot of paintings out of that particular workshop, because I took a ton of photographs, and I've done a whole series of. I started a whole series of what I'm calling the Ball in the Hall series. And it started with a painting called The Ball in the Hall, which was from...
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah.
which was sort of like from the view of like looking here that way, and it had a ball that was sort of right about there, and so I've got a whole series. You can probably see them behind me, off to the left here,
Okay.
off to my left. You can vaguely see those probably, but anyway, that's I like to switch gears to from landscape to interiors now and again, and
Yeah, the doorway reminds me a little of, there's a famous Hopper painting of where the doorway, the water comes right up to the doorway.
yeah.
You know, and you get that in Maine, you know, some places where there's, you know, there's almost the illusion that, you know, and then actually in Jeffery Becton's photographs, the water's actually coming right into the house.
Oh yeah, it's coming right in, and it's like, you know, the
Yeah.
mold remediation guys are going to have to show up afterwards.
Yeah. Exactly. Great. Let's go on to this vast view, and I'm taking my guess here that this is from Beach Mountain looking down Long Pond.
Yep, you're spot on.
Yeah, I have been on this trail so many times.
Me too.
And I never get tired of coming down from the tower and suddenly having this thing open up with Blue Hill in the distance.
Oh yeah.
And it's such an iconic place.
Yeah.
There's actually a spot along there where there's sort of a built-in chair.
Yeah. There's three of them now. There's
are
three
there?
chairs. Yeah, there's a papa, mama, and a baby chair.
Wow. Well, the bears ought to find that.
I'm sure they have.
Somebody spied a bear on Norway Drive the other day. It was on Facebook. Somebody posted a photo of it, a mother and child.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, they're coming right in. It's good.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite spots too, Carl. I've done a bunch of paintings from this view and also from the top, you know, the tower looking the other way, but this has this sort of the layers of things that are happening with that view, you know, the trail and the trees and the water and the mountains, and then, you know, it's why I called it sort of the vast view.
It's pretty pure too. I mean, you don't really see many houses, or a lot of it's park, and so there's that that's wonderful too.
Yeah.
And gosh, I in any season that's just a killer view.
Yeah,
whether you're up there in the winter or the summer or whatever.
Yeah.
So did you take your easel out there?
I have a few times. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's not too bad a slog. I mean,
No, it's actually a fairly short hike. I could do that pretty easily with a setup. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Let's go on to the next one. Keep moving here. This one is called Nestled. And you say in your notes, I love this, that you say that there are some stories in the lives of boats.
Right. Right.
I think that's great. And so what did you have in mind there? The sort of the character, the way they've been worn. Yeah,
the character, you know, what's happened on those boats, where were they going, you know, what adventures they had been on, and it seems like, you know, that dories and dinghies and skiffs and all the and so forth, that they seem to be the workhorses of any wharf, you know.
Yeah.
You know, you know, if you could put human emotions to these things, they would have a lot of patience, because because they've you know, water has fallen in them, and, you know, seaweed, and, you know, all kinds of stuff, and but
they also have a lot of character too.
Oh yeah.
I mean, individual, you know, I'm thinking of when I go to the Upper Town Dock in Southwest Harbor to take the boat out to Cranberry.
Yeah.
And you've got, you know, you're there 10 minutes early or something, and there are all of these dinghies and rowboats lined up there, and each one, you know, has a life preserver or oars or water sloshing around, or a gas can or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
A little half cut open milk jug or water jug.
The bailer.
Yeah.
No, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And here you have a little more detail than than
Yeah.
usual. So that it's nice the way that the different spots of color lead you around the painting, and
Thanks.
I love the red of the edge of the central boat there.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, me
wonderful.
too. That was a blast to paint. It was one of the last things I put on there, and
Almost
just
like
sort of,
lipstick.
yeah, it was like
I
you're
mean, like,
going along,
whoa,
and it's like
just
I've got that dark green, and I knew exactly what was going to happen when I put that red there. It's like, oh man,
yeah.
that's great. That is so cool.
Yeah, that's a beauty.
Yeah.
Let's go to a
Yeah.
flower painting.
Yeah.
Wild Violets, and I was just curious how where this was and how this came about.
Yeah, this is in my backyard, and it was, when the little violets and apparently I'm not a botanist, so I found out that these are actually bluettes. So
Yeah.
and I asked friends about it after I titled the painting, which I've learned my lesson there. But anyway, it's in the backyard, and the violets and also these little bluettes, they just form in these little tiny clumps in the spring, and they feel like just sort of like these little parties that are happening out on the garden, on the lawn, and they seem to be one of the first things to pop up. And I got way down, I was like down on the ground taking the photograph for this. There was like no way I could have painted it from this vantage point.
Well, I was going to say too, aren't the flowers quite small?
They are. They're
and
very.
You really have given them their full triumphal.
Yeah, and that's
portrayal.
what I was trying to do, because they were just like, they're tiny. They're like, I don't know, 6 inches tall or something from top to bottom of stem, and I wanted to give them their due.
It's curious that the painting reminded me. Some of your work reminds me of this artist William Moise. I don't know if you know who he was, but he actually wrote a book. He lived down your way for many years. He was quite well known as a landscape painter.
Yeah.
And he referred to his work as abstract impressionist.
Oh.
And I like that. I think that some of your work kind of fits that bill.
Yeah, I like that term too.
I recommend him. I think Karen Wilkes was carrying his work for a while.
Yeah.
At the Courthouse Gallery, William Moise.
Yeah, I will check him out.
Recommend people check him out.
Yeah.
Let's go to Jubilation. Jubilation. Paul Simon.
Yeah.
So, and the title actually, it leads me to remark that on the kind of the joyous quality of a lot of your work. We were actually, before this talk, I was talking about that with my son and my wife about that. There's something that's joyous about your work, that it brings so much pleasure to the eye, and so I think the Jubilation here is very evident.
It's for me. I really enjoy painting and sort of sharing that experience with others, and it's when I came across these lupins out in Hancock, this was like early spring when they're happening.
Yeah.
And it was not super early spring, but anyway, I was out at this spot, and of course everybody was retreating in the beginning of stay-at-home orders and all that from COVID. Right. And this is one of the first forays I sort of went out. I was even kind of nervous about going out plein air painting for whatever crazy reason.
Yeah.
I was just kind of worried that, people would be coming by and such. But anyway, this spot, I saw these, I just got to paint these lupins, and because they just felt like such joy in the midst of, what was happening in around the planet.
I really need that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Beauty. So let's keep moving here. Yeah. Maybe I should check the Q&A. If anybody has any questions, please chime in. We'll get to your questions. And I'm not really checking the time, but I'm hoping.
Yeah, we got about 15 more minutes here.
Oh, okay. Here we go. So for Spacious Skies, I'd love to curate a show someday of clouds, of cloud paintings.
Yeah, that would be
because
amazing.
there are some really wonderful ones. Some of your fellow Courthouse
Yep.
gallery painters, Tom Curry and
Yes, I was just
Philip,
thinking of him.
William Irvine, Sarah Farragher.
Yeah.
There's something, just magical and it's ever moving and there's so many ways you can do it.
Yeah.
I remember telling people, I think it was the show at the Farms at the Wendell Gilly last year. They had a show. They borrowed a bunch of paintings from the Farnsworth.
Yes, I saw that.
And,
Yeah.
and I said to I was doing a training with the docents there, and I said, just ask people to look at the water, just the way the artists in this particular room treat the water. No two the same. Everyone, completely different from the last, color-wise, shape-wise. Obviously related to the condition of the sea, but it's wonderful, the variety.
Yeah.
And these clouds are just gorgeous.
Oh, thanks.
Chunky and
Yeah.
flowing around and yeah.
Yeah, it's I love, as you can tell, I love painting the sky, and it's sort of the vastness of it and the ever changingness of the sky is just quite compelling.
And this one has an enormous amount of motion in it too.
Yeah.
I think I was thinking that the horizon going down the way it does, kind of it gives sort of a sweep to it, and then you have sort of this counter movement of these clouds, going across the sky.
Yeah.
There's a lot of motion in there.
Yep. And one of the things, I painted a small study of this piece, like a little 5x7. I was out last year at Aylesford teaching a workshop, and one of the paintings I did while I was out there was this view, and it's, when you're out there and because when you're out on those islands, as the vastness of the sky, it's like the big sky. It feels like being out west somewhere, and the movement. And I was trying to, express a little bit of that happening.
Yeah, you did. You did good.
Thanks.
Let's go on to the next one. So this one has kind of two titles: Approaching Rain, Deep Waters. And I sort of, to account for what's going on, you have that curtain that I referenced earlier coming in from the left of the approaching storm, and then you have these kind of profound blue waters in the foreground, and then those wonderful sentinel islands in the distance.
Yeah.
What were you after here?
Yeah, one thing was I had done a couple little studies. Again, it was going back to that very first painting that we were talking about, of where I had painted over some other pieces.
Oh, right. Yep.
And I created some little 8x10 pieces, and I was just sort of playing from memory what I've seen on my adventures out on the water or hiking or wherever, and trying to get this sense of the deep, not only the elementalness of the sky, but also the vastness or deepness of the water with those blues, and then the movement and the relationship between those and the islands and the clouds and the water, all of those elements sort of working together and how they interact.
Yeah, I'm just noticing, and this is also similar to other of your paintings, is the way that the brush strokes move. Some kind of go up and down, like for the islands, and then some will go across, and that also creates movement and motion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Let's go on to Lapis Lazuli Coast. And here in your notes, you talked about the interrelationships in your work. This seems to me like almost like a tone poem. This is just actually a musical term but I think it's sort of where the water, island, and sky are all of a piece, sort of a unified single whole. There's it's variations on lapis lazuli.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of the things I was trying to do here was, as you so aptly described, was sort of limit myself to one tone, so to speak, and the blue, and it's kind of this mixture of an ultramarine blue and a couple other blues, and sort of thinking about various artists that have done sort of monochromatic or toned paintings in this way. Tone's not quite the right word, but more monochromatic.
Right.
Thinking of Picasso's famous blue period, where he did a whole series of monochromatic paintings in the key of blue, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, it's a way to really kind of explore one particular way of painting, or one particular color, and how far can I stretch those blues in such.
I have my first question here, Phil.
Yeah, excellent.
What does it add to your work? This is coming from Helen O'Connor. What does it add to your work when you name your paintings? Some artists are not so specific. They call a painting something like motif number 1.
Right.
It's a really great question.
Yeah, it is a really great question. Sometimes the titles are just really, really hard. Other times they just, I have to sort of sit with them for a while, say, okay, what's happening in this painting? What can I say that will add to the painting and say a little bit about it more in conceptual terms that can't be said in paint. So for me, it's like it's adding a little extra to it, but also not giving away things necessarily. Sometimes if I say too much in a title, I feel like I'm, giving away things somehow. Maybe that's not quite the way to say it, but
yeah, no, that's good. Yeah. So a couple more questions here.
Sure.
This one is from Sarah Brundage, who says, thank you for sharing these. I always enjoy hearing the why and how. You took the photo of violets, and I know you work from sketches, but do you ever just paint from just memory or experience? Great question.
Yeah. Hey, Sarah. Glad you're on the other side there. Yeah, I do actually. This piece and probably that piece and this piece were from memory, and a few others. It's because I've seen Maine islands, hundreds, probably if not thousands of times. I feel like I have this kind of iconic Maine island somewhere in here that just comes out.
Yeah, and then we had just one comment that someone wished that we had given the sizes of the paintings. I should have done that.
Yeah.
But in general, Phil, these paintings are...
They range, like this one is 18 by 24 inches. The previous one was 24 by 30. But they range, most of these are anywhere from 8 by 10 to 36 by 48 inches.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So why don't we go on to the last slide. And this is Treetop Twilight, and this is 24 by 30. I think you said once upon a time that, and you actually referenced it this evening, that there are particular times of day that you prefer to paint.
Yeah.
And if I'm not wrong, I remember you saying once that you didn't like the middle of the day.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the middle of the day, just because, if it's in the summer, it's blazing hot in the middle of the day for practical reasons. But the other practical reason is that the colors tend to get washed out because, the sun is right overhead, and there's not very many shadows, and it's not quite as dramatic. And early in the day and later in the day, the shadows are longer and the colors are more intense, and that's when I tend to like like to do, to be out plein air painting, or going out and taking photographs if I can't carry my gear out.
I'm trying to remember though, you haven't done a whole lot of sunset paintings, have you?
I've done a few.
Yeah.
I actually did one under pressure, under extreme pressure. Like, when was this? It was like 2018. Was that Julia Walker-Smith from Friends of Acadia, and it was one of their celebrations that they had. Was it 2009? When was it? Anyway,
Yeah.
so
Day.
she invited me to paint the sunset at top of Schoodic, and she had it filmed and photographed. So I was out there painting as the sun was going down, a fairly large 24 by 36 painting. I had prepped, I had done a study beforehand, so I knew where I wanted to be more or less. And it was probably one of the fastest big paintings I've ever done.
Wow.
Plus the fact that you're sort of like trying not to stare into the sun, as it's going down, and just the amazing color changes that was happening and the decisions that you had to make on the fly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's cool. Actually, it looks like I might have another question here.
Excellent.
That's an old friend of mine, Simon Arnstein. Terrific webinar. Hi, Carl. Love your work. Regret that the Schoodic landscape liquids and solids is sold.
Oh.
Just keep watching.
Yeah.
And actually, that leads me to ask you, Phil, what are you working on now?
What I'm working on now is a series of interiors. I'm just finishing them up for the Edgewater Gallery in Vermont. So it's mostly interiors with a few landscapes, and I've been pushing the whole squeegee thing that I've been telling you about to another level in some of the landscapes and even some of the interiors. And it's further iterations on the ball in the hall series, as we were talking about before.
Right, good.
And in some fun stuff. Right now, I've got a painting of some stuffed animals on a couch on the easel.
Okay.
So it's called The Usual Suspects.
Right. And then a quick follow-up question from Simon. Have you considered a larger scale? Spacious Skies at 48 by 60 would be mind-boggling.
Wow. Yeah, it would be.
Anyway,
yeah.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
And then a comment from Ann Williams. Generally, I am drawn to paintings of very specific parts of Maine. For example, vignettes like boats and lobster shacks. I'm from Texas and love Maine in the summertime.
Yeah.
Your more abstract pieces are just beautiful and speak to me more than they ever have. Love your work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
That's really
sweet. That's very sweet.
Cool.
Thank you.
Coming in from Texas.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how we're doing on time. It looks like Mary Ann may be coming back in.
It looks like we've got a couple minutes left. If there's any other questions or whatever.
This has really been fun, Phil, to talk to you about your work, and I really appreciate the Southwest Harbor Library for hosting us this evening, and thank you, Phil, for the jubilation you bring. All of us through your work, and
you're very, very welcome. Thank you, Carl, and thank you, Mary Ann. This has been a lot of fun.
You can really tell you like what you're doing.
Oh, I try to follow my bliss.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I have a quick question. Do you this time of year, the angle of the sun is so different and starting more so. Is there a season during which you prefer to paint?
I think sort of the summer and the fall are sort of my favorites. The spring, it's sort of a never-ending battle with the bugs that I'm not a fan of. And unless I go out to a location like right out on the water where I'm sure to have some wind. But it's spring and fall. I mean, summer and fall are my favorites. Yeah.
You've done some wonderful winter paintings though too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
I have to say. I mean, one of my favorite Maine painters, Carl Springhorn, did a lot of those really chilly
Oh, yeah.
And you've done a few like that where there's that sun off the ice kind of
Yep.
quality, and it's
Yep.
really gets to your bones.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
there's a lot of light in it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And in those cases, I'm not an intrepid plein air painter. I do have some friends that are really intrepid, will go out. I have a couple of students that will go out, in full gear, and paint in the middle of winter. It's just, I'm too thin to do that.
Yep, we found poor Phil out there, frozen.
Right, just frozen solid. He was about to make a brushstroke, and that's
frozen too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, if anyone is interested in getting a copy of Philip Frey, Here and Now, you can get them by going to the www.courthousegallery.com, or you can call them at 667-6611. That's area code 207. So
and we'll sign it for you.
Here and Now.
Yes.
Yep. So Philip Frey, Here and Now. And
Yeah.
here he is. Right now.
Thank you so much, Carl, and thank you, Mary. It was
a
lot of fun. And thank you for everyone for questions.
Yeah, thanks everybody for.
And even though I can't, we can't see you on the other end, we know you're there. Thank you.
So long, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.